Okay, welcome everybody to Popcorn Therapy, where the stories we love tell us something about who we are. And the story that we're going to be working with today is a non-fiction story. Lindy West and Adult Braces, which is her most recent memoir, and all of the stuff that has happened around it, of which there is very much. I popped in on this conversation a couple of weeks ago, and I just have been bursting to talk about it. And I'm so excited to have Tanille here with me today. And I can't wait to hear all of their thoughts. So Tanille, why don't you tell us a little bit about who you are, how you're coming to this conversation,
Sure.
what you want folks to know about you?
Yeah, sure. Hi, folks. My name is Tanille Geib, and I'm an intimacy coach and educator. I just turned 40, which seems pretty exciting.
Happy birthday.
Thank you. And why
Welcome
that
to the club.
Yeah, thank you. And I'm coming from Lekwungen and Wasanic territory on the island. I'm honored to have a home here, and the land and the people of this land has held me well and taught me a lot the past decades. So that's where I'm videoing from today. My pronouns are she, they, and Hubie. Hubie is human being but shortened. I'm an intimacy coach and educator. I've been studying human sexuality for 17 years. My previous background is a theater writer, director, and producer. So I am a creative as well. And I got into intimacy coaching and education through community. And I started being a coach about, I think it's almost a decade. I should check my numbers. It started from a place where men were really looking for a lot of care and intimacy. And I was like, wait, I think I have something to offer here in that specific way. And my passion right now is really working with couples particularly. I'm also one of the co-founders of the Queer Care Collective, which is a queer and trans practitioner hub, I guess, for people to come get care. And then, I've also been running Slow Burn Dating with my work wife, Cora Bilsker, who is also a registered social worker. And we've been working the past year and a half, 2 years with the Royal BC Museum on creating curated events for people to learn about connection post-pandemic. And it's kind of not a speed dating or an algorithm. It's kind of let's be human in a room together. Maybe we'll learn something. And we actually get to explore through the museum and do games and activities and deep-hearted questions and answers. And that we might be going on a little bit of a Canadian tour next year. So around Slow Burn Dating, because it's been asked to come to many different cities. So we'll see if I have the capacity. Personally, I've been, curious, learning, open, all the way to a more solid and knowing about how I love since I was about 17, really trying to look for where am I in the world and how do I relate to humans and how can that be a healthy way to build community. I think of it first and foremost as a really badass way to exist in our current culture, but also exploring polyamory and relationship anarchy and the different ways of relating and the human condition and what do I learn about myself, what do I learn about others, and making a weave of connection that's pretty non-normative, but it's also really deeply around intimate friendships and building community and those kinds of things. So professionally, I support people that are in polyamorous partnerships. And then also, since I was 17, I've been grappling and learning and sturdy in these ways that we get to question how we relate to one another. So that's a bit personally and kind of professionally how I'm coming to this topic today and how the lenses, I guess, there's many, to read this book and chat with you about it.
Thank you so much for all of that and for being here with all of those lenses. And now working as a therapist, you know, relationships and intimacy is a huge, huge topic, you know, that comes up all the time. And also different versions of relationship, you know, people having questions about, what does monogamy mean to me? Is this the right way for me to go? You know, is there another way? What could that look like? And, you know, I support people in those ways as well. And I really wanted to talk to you about this partly because a lot of the criticism of this book has been about polyamory itself, right? It's like,
Yes,
this is a problem because it's polyamory. And it's like, no, guys, like, let's back up a little bit. Let's talk about what is going on here. So I'm really glad that you're coming with all of that mindfulness and insight from your own experience and working with your clients so that we can talk about this in a way that is like, let's actually break down a little bit what is happening and why people are so upset as well. Yeah. Maybe. Why am I so upset, you know, about this and so on.
Yeah.
So
Definitely.
Why don't you tell me a bit about Lindy West? What is your relationship with Lindy West?
This is my first time coming across her and her work. And like now I'm just inspired to go see more, and digest more. Obviously she's very thoughtful and funny and has like this, just a flow of, sharing that is, it's easy to, relate in some ways, I guess, but you know, I'll talk about the compassionate piece too with this current work that was really pretty jarring for me as a person, but I think she is a brilliant creative and I'm just so curious to see more of her work and her lineage of work.
Yeah, a lot of this conversation has been about who she is on the internet, how she fits into the feminist narrative of things, and the body positivity, fat activist sort of perspective as well. It's interesting to hear about that because I feel like I was writing around the same time in a similar way to what she was. Like this real sort of trend of confessional style,
Right.
you know, personal essays or whatever it is. And a lot of my writing has been informed by that desire to offer relatability, that desire to offer vulnerability. And I feel like, you know, a piece that I have definitely worked with is which pieces do I want to share? Which pieces feel too vulnerable to share? You know, all of that stuff. And so that was really where her career kind of began. She wrote Shrill, which I read and loved. I thought it was such a useful and interesting perspective on, you know, being in a fat body in America, like what that was like for her, how it felt for her. And then I did watch some of the show, which I also loved parts of the show, but I was watching it with my mother-in-law in the background and was realizing like, oh, this is very like explicit and just that she has sort of a style of, you know, and I thought that was present in Adult Braces as well. Like there's a lot of like really explicit sort of cursing and, you know, crude sort of language and stuff like that I was like, maybe I'll turn this off while my mother-in-law is here. And so Adult Braces she's written a few of these memoir style books. And so let me recap the story of the book. So, you know, I know that folks listening may or may not have read the book. I feel like the spoilers are out there in the sense that everyone is so aware of like what her life is and what's happening now, like the ending is out there and so on. So, my understanding of the story, and please feel free to like fill in where you read it differently or whatever it is that at the end of Shrill, the happy ending of Shrill is that she gets to marry Aham, who's her best friend, and she feels like loved and accepted by him in a way that she hadn't before. And that was kind of how the book like was tied up in a bow. And then Adult Braces picks up from a place which is like things were maybe not as perfect as I kind of made them sound at that time. And it sounds like she and Aham had gotten together and broken up a couple of times around the passing of her dad. One of the points when they got together before they got married, there was a conversation that they had where he basically said to her, I am polyamorous.
Yeah.
I need to be polyamorous in my life, and I am willing to end this relationship if you don't want to come with me on this journey. She says, well, she doesn't say I'm monogamous. She kind of says okay, but it's very clear that she's doing that because she doesn't want to lose him. And it's very clear from the way she talks about it in Adult Braces that she's hoping that it would never come up. She's hoping she'd never have to talk about it or deal with it. And the explicit rules that she laid out were things like, don't tell me about it. Don't date anyone in our city. Don't date anyone I know. And I'm not sure how clear this was between the two of them, but it sounded like don't fall in love with anyone. Like, I don't want you having a love relationship with anyone. The way she phrases it is something like don't be with anyone who will ruin our lives. And I think the implication is, you know, I don't want someone to take you away from me in a love way. Right. And I want to talk about this with you, which is that, like, she uses these words a lot, but she doesn't necessarily define, like, what is polyamory versus an open relationship. And there's so many different styles, right? So that happens. Aham doesn't tell, she doesn't ask. And then a fan sees him kissing someone, lets her know. It turns out that this is a full love relationship that he's had for long enough of a time that he has to go... that he's become her person, essentially. She's experiencing a death, so he wants to go be with her to help support her in that death, which Lindy is devastated by. And then Lindy goes on the road trip that this book is kind of structured around, where she has a lot of questions about what she wants. And it's not just about this relationship, it's also about her relationship to herself. She's still working out a lot of her thoughts and feelings about being in a fat body. What does that mean? Her relationship with food. She uses the word codependency a lot, which she also doesn't define, and I want to talk about that a little bit. And then by the end, she and Aham, she's fallen in love with Aham's girlfriend, and now they're in a throuple living in Lindy's cabin in the woods. Side note, Aham did have a girlfriend also that broke every single rule that she had laid out, and that was she just mentioned that, and that never comes up again. So that's kind of where we're at in terms of the relationship aspect of things. So there's also a moment that has been spoken of many times where Aham says something like, monogamy has a relationship with colonialism and racism and white supremacy, and therefore he doesn't say this. I'm not sure he said this. It's been projected onto him that he basically said, if you don't want to do this with me, you are racist. I think Lindy maybe takes that on for herself. She kind of says, like, as a white woman, maybe I'm not understanding that side of it as much. And so, I do think that, like, my understanding of monogamy, the way that I've come at it probably more so as a white woman is from a patriarchal perspective, right? Like, I sort of see monogamy as a structure that has certainly been used to control and own women's bodies, right? I think it totally makes sense from a colonial perspective as well, right? It's who's allowed to express their sexuality with who else, who's in control of that, who gets to decide. All of those things have been hugely influenced by white supremacy, colonialism, capitalism, patriarchy, all of those big systems that we live inside of. And I think that exploring your relationship to monogamy or not, it has some identity politics to it, right? Like, I think there is something important for me personally about, like, I've had my own sort of relationship with monogamy or not, and so on. And for me, I think there is something quite important about claiming my own body, having my own choices with my body, and monogamy not simply being a way of, like, belonging to someone, like my body belonging to someone, right? So I think that is important for me. And this was messy. It was messy. The whole thing was messy. The relationship was messy. I know that this is often like how these kinds of relationships play out is in a messy way. Like, obviously that can happen. We're human beings. We're messy. How many times have I had messy relationships that haven't been out in the internet on YouTube videos and in memoirs and so on? Like, we're not all out there having our business, for everyone else to comment on. And also a lot of what has been spoken about is like the fact that all of this dirty laundry is out there. There are people pointing at the laundry and saying it's dirty. And like, that is kind of, you know, what happens when you are offering these really, really personal things out there. Right. So all of that to be said, you know, I think there are some problems with how this came out, like the sort of narrative of Lindy saying like, I'm in a polyamorous relationship. This is good and right. It is like the moral type of relationship to have. And it's all my own problems that I had to separate myself from. And I've like resolved those things within myself. Therefore, now I can be in this polyamorous relationship with it, which is correct. I'm not sure that she's intending to say that, but that's how the narrative has kind of come across. Right. You know, one of my deepest understandings about any relationship structure is whatever structure you're in, there are rules and agreements, like you say, spoken and unspoken, right? There are expectations, there are boundaries, and almost no matter what type of relationship you have, there are boundaries to be broken, and you can be hurt in any of these types of relationships. Like, I think earlier on I had a sense of, oh, you know, polyamory or non-monogamy means you're not allowed to be jealous, or you're not allowed to have feelings, or you're not allowed to have boundaries. Like, now I understand that's not the case, right? But I feel like the way Aham approached this, again, we don't have his side of the story.
Which I would love.
I'm
very curious.
Yeah, I mean, we do get, I don't know if you heard about the email that he sent to Sachi Cole, who wrote a little profile on Lindy around the book.
I don't know if I've seen that. I read something before, but I don't know if I saw the email piece there.
Yeah, so Sachi Cole, she's also a memoirist. She wrote a profile on Lindy West that I read and was kind of unremarkable to me. Like, I thought it was fine. Like, I didn't really notice anything particularly strongly worded about it or anything like that. And Aham had written an extremely strongly worded email to her calling her a mean girl. He used a lot of F-bombs and things like that. Like, it was abusive language, basically, to her. And so I feel like we get this little piece of, ooh, like, okay, that's a way that he's comfortable speaking to a person, you know, a woman and so on. So you're kind of wondering like, oh, what else is going on there that we're not hearing about? But yeah, I mean, I don't know how he thought that conversation went about their opening up their relationship. I don't know if he thought it was ethically, if he was in polyamory or if he was following those rules, or like, I don't know his sort of side of that. But, you know, the side we get from Lindy is like, it's looking pretty messy, to put it mildly. So yeah, tell me your thoughts and reflections on all that.
Yeah, so in the beginning of the book, and maybe this is the way that it's edited and produced too, like, again, we have to take this as it is nonfiction, but it is a story, right? And we're going to have that, like, again, in the way that we colonially write is like, there's a beginning, there's conflict, there's resolution, right? So we are looking at this like as a story structure as well. And, you know, I'm not their therapist, any of them. I'm not intertwined in their life. And so we do only get an edited version that is being put out there, while it be very vulnerable and open. So in the beginning of the book, I really felt that there was unethical pieces happening, that it was messy, that I feel like she made decisions to, you know, commit to this man under duress. So that is definitely the way that I look at it. A lot of these things is like, what is the power dynamic and who has what power and what element of identity or situation, or right? So there's a lot going on there. So if someone is under duress and making this choice, that is hard. And it's around that she speaks to about that codependency piece. And what, like, some of the sentences were like, oh, my heart just like warmed for her. Because, you know, there was like this intensity of like, well, I can't live with him and I can't live without him piece. So I guess I'm just gonna do this, without kind of maybe knowing the vastness of what polyamory could mean to both of them, to her. Like, I don't think there was like a well thought out many months thing for her to like really understand what that would mean for her and her life. So that's why I say it's like this kind of, maybe it was a more of a duress choice, I guess, and that is going to come with a power dynamic that can be abused. Yeah, so it starts off in the story that like things are messy, things are maybe coercive, things are muddy, confusing, there might be cheating going on. But again, like I want to say to like a lot of people is like whether you're monogamous or polyamorous or whatever you want, or open, and there's all these other different relationship styles, like of course you could be cheated on and treated shittily and all of these things. So but you know, like that's what I was confused about towards the end. It was like this quick fun wrap up, like everything's good. But I would have liked to actually see more of the weaving of like, you know, the tension moments, what the specific things she learned, why is she still choosing this, what are the benefits for her, what are the benefits for the relationship, what are the power dynamics going on, you know, and again her mental health and like her deep, like, oh, like I just like, ooh, that was the hardest part for me to listen to, was all of the deep self-hatred, of body, of self, of her, you know, what she has to offer, and that she's unlovable. And I just like I cried like a couple times. I was like, oh, this is like a really hard brain and experience to be in. Yeah. And that doesn't mean you don't deserve to figure it out, like, and be in relationship, right? As you're trying to figure this out. You know, and so that was like the startling part for me. The book is just the immense, detailed, at times disgust she had with herself. So that was hard, but yeah, so I feel like there was like this hard beginning and it feels like that, like, you know, in the story context, like that he's the bad guy. And I'm not to say he isn't, you know, I think he was a very sloppy hinge, and did hurt people, with his actions and behaviors. And what a hinge is like someone that is, maintaining multiple relationships, and their responsibility is to like show up in those relationships in good ways or figure those things out. And they're like, it's a V, if you're in a multiple relationship, like a V, and this person is the hinge, that's what they call it. Sure. And then you have multiple relationships. But yeah, I think he was sloppy. And I just also want to like think about like my early days in my 20s of like how sloppy polyamorous like relationships were, because we're all just like, oh, we want to try this thing out, let's see how this goes. Oh god, that was a shit show. So, you know, but because they're kind of
monogamous relationships were pretty sloppy too, right, to be fair. And I think it is an important note that, you know, when polyamorous relationships end, people are like, that's why it won't work, but we don't say that when monogamous relationship ends, because they do all the time too, right?
all the time yeah,
they're it's not the fault of the relationship structure.
No, it's like the starting of the, oh, well, I'm just accepting him as polyamorous was under duress. And not to say that she doesn't want to choose polyamory or be with this other person too, or all of these things. Like, she's obviously gone on a journey, but I also am curious about that kind of like neat, tidy ending that kind of went quick, like at the end of the book itself, right? Of like, well, I've got butterflies for this person. I'm going to meet them, you know, meet her, and we're all going to date and live together. And so that could be an option. And I'm so glad that they maybe have found that for themselves. But it felt like a really quick wrap up for when the story started, like a lot more chaotic than that, I guess.
Yeah. Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'm thinking of a whole other book about how she fell in love with Roya and what that meant to her and so on. There just wasn't much about that. And what there was a bit problematic too. There was also a part in one of the chapters that I re-listened to this morning where she says something like, what is the likelihood that I would meet my partner's girlfriend, find her attractive, she would find me attractive, we would fall in love with each other, and then it would be all like, happy throuple forever kind of thing. And in the narrative, she says that's extremely unlikely that's going to happen, right?
Yeah, it's extremely
and she kind of
unlikely.
says like, maybe I'm criticizing myself or expecting what other people are going to judge. But there's so many moments in the book where she does that, where she doubts herself or second guesses herself. And, if you didn't know the ending, I feel like it reads like a divorce memoir, like it reads like she's leading up to this, realizing she doesn't need this man to live her life and she can move on and everything. Like that's kind of, it feels like that's where it's going, except it goes in a completely different way, in a way that I feel like from a writing perspective, we're not really with her. Like we're not really getting that. Like you said, I mean, there may be so much more to that, but if that's not the book we read, right?
Yeah. And I think too, like, yeah, if we expect that, oh yeah, she's going to choose herself and her power and whatever that means, but then it also is related, she's choosing this. And again, like, if, like, there's been so many criticisms about her being the victim. And again, I'm not saying that there isn't abuse going on. I'm not here to judge that actually in this conversation, but like, that's also misogynistic. Like, she is a grown-ass human and she can make decisions for herself, and they can be hard decisions. They can be complicated, and there's not a lot of talk about her sexuality, and like this might be the like, oh my god, I get to be bisexual for the first time and like explore those parts of my life, and all of these things. And so yeah, I kind of feel like that we're missing a lot of that part of the journey of like what are all the ways that she's like, oh, this is making sense for me, besides
it was sort of it felt like a conspicuous lack of conversation about her queerness, right?
Yeah, 100%.
I think I would have maybe believed it a little bit more or followed it a little bit more if she had been talking about having been attracted to women and what that felt like, and how she had repressed that in herself or whatever it is, like any information about that. Like, it was really not mentioned, and so much of her conversation about her sexuality was about how it was repressed or confused, or she felt so like unlovable and unattractive in her body, and so it was hard to kind of
for many years. Like, there's like a lot of damage that was done to her around intimacy, and like that is just such a normal thing. Like, I'm a bigger person, like I've gone through that with men over the years, like that you are like wrecked by men and your sexuality at times because you're just a bigger person. Like, that is like, there's so much fat phobia going on in the comments. I think there's like misogyny going on, that she can't actually make full decisions for herself. But I do want to talk about power dynamics. Like, what are the power things at play? What is the codependency? What is mental health? And people with mental health issues absolutely deserve love and relationships and care, so like, and then also to talk about like the rarity of finding your meta attractive and wanting to. So metas in polyamory are like your partner's partner. So Roya and Lindy would be metas. That's what that dynamic is called. And so it would be really rare that you meet your meta and fall in love and decide to be together. But I also know in my real life that has happened to people and they're very happy. So again, it's not like the first thing that usually happens, but there's a lot of interweaving relationships that happen that form things like that, so again, it's like, it's far off in that way, but it's also like could actually be real and happening for them.
I have so many thoughts and things I want to add, but let's back up a little bit. Could you, if you're comfortable, define polyamory for me? Like, how would you, how would you talk about that?
Okay, so yeah, it's really hard when you start talking about, like, so the two realms, what we'll do is like, there's monogamy and non-monogamy. Okay. So monogamy could be, And again, it's different within our Western culture than some others. But like right now, it seems like the Western world is like serial monogamous, right? Like you are with one person romantically and sexually at a time, right? And that
And you have to have cleanly ended that relationship, processed it,
yeah,
to be ready to
to the
completely
next.
give your body to the next one. Yeah.
Yeah, sure. So it's
Right.
like around like romance, I guess, the dating part and the sex part, right? What monogamy could mean for lots of Westerners. Then, secondly, you look at non-monogamy, and there's like tons and tons and tons and tons under that, right? So even under non-monogamy, there can be like consensual or ethical people have been using in the field. Consensual non-monogamy, meaning like all adults are consenting. And it doesn't always mean that it's sexual and romantic and practical, right? The like living together and the nesting. So, and under non-monogamy, there's like consensual non-monogamy, and then under that, like polyamory is one version of relationship structure that is like, if you look at the words, it means many loves, and again, that doesn't necessarily mean multiple sex relationships. It just means I am in consensual, hopefully, ways of relating to multiple people. Everyone knows about it. Everyone's consenting to it. And that they have desire and capacity and effort put towards having multiple relationships. And then I'll just give you a couple more other ones just to frame it. So open relationships are more framed as like there are people in a unit that are together, and that's maybe nested or married. Nested also means living together. Sorry, people might not know that. Living together, have children together, something like that. And then the openness is you can go out and have sexual intimacy with people, but don't like do the loving part. Right? So that's kind of what open relationships could be in the umbrella. And then there's something like, relationship anarchy, which is like in our Western culture, we talk about like, we have been fed stories that like we meet someone, we date, we become exclusive, then we, depending on what dynamic you're in civilization, but like you probably get married, you probably have kids, you live together, you share finances, these kinds of things. So relationship anarchy is getting off the escalator, or thinking about the escalator at least, and creating relationships based on what the relationship is as opposed to what we're supposed to be creating in relationship. So it's really kind of looking at like breaking down what we're supposed to do for a relationship and just questioning it, looking at it, what works, and then seeing what actually would be a thriving relationship between each person in that dynamic, as opposed to we have to follow these steps for it to be good or healthy or valid. So those would just be some options. But even in polyamory, there's like solo polyamory and all of these things. So there's like lots and lots of webs of ways of relating. Yeah.
Yeah, there was a pretty useful podcast that I can link in the show notes with Claire Perelman, I think her name was, that gives a pretty good definition of all of these different forms, or not all of them. There's a lot of them, but like many of the different forms. And my understanding is that what Lindy thought she was agreeing to was an open relationship where she and Aham were primary partners, right, and then they could theoretically both have sexual experiences with others, but that would never impact their primary relationship. And Aham was asking for polyamory, which is when he could have like a full love relationship with someone else. So again, that may have just been a misunderstanding. They may not have really talked it through enough. It sounds like she had a bit of the way she tells it is like, I don't want to talk about this anymore. I've agreed to it. And then there's that kind of heartbreaking narrative around like, if I can just be a good enough wife and be enough for him, then he won't need this other thing, right?
Yeah, that comes up a lot in people's insecurities and like it's kind of like when you think about all of your friendships, every person and every dynamic has something beautiful and unique to offer. You know, there's like friends that I'm like, oh my God, we'll have like hours of like philosophy, like conversations. And then there's friends that like we go shopping together or jump in the water and scream together. Like each relationship is going to offer something different and unique based on the chemistry of those two humans and their souls, right? And so like it's a really big common thing when people are maybe even considering going from monogamy or monogamish to open or poly or something like that, as like, well, if I was enough, then like why? Like they wouldn't need more. I think that there's like a softness there for me because I'm like, oh my God, each person is so beautiful and gorgeous and enough and in those specific ways, but that's not like the only thing is out there. Each person's soul and wrapped in body has something different to offer, you know? And like, that's how I worked on my jealousy in my 20s around polyamory, is like, wow, I know that like I am so different and unique, you know? Like my spirit is something else, my body is something else. And like, someone's not just going to leave me for another person just to like fulfill something that I'm not. It's like, well, that new person that they're dating or seeing or whatever, like, is different from me. And like, yeah, maybe we're going to like lose our relationship because it's not working, but I don't relate anymore. Like I did a lot of years of work on this, is like, I'm special and unique and they're dating me because I'm special and unique in the ways that I am. And of course they're going to date other people that are special and unique in the ways that I'm not. And isn't that great? I don't want to be everything for everyone. Like that would be exhausting. But yeah, like I think maybe you're right on like the miscommunication of understanding or the education around what were they agreeing to around the, I guess, the non-monogamy, which umbrella. And one thing I want to say too is like labels only get you so far as well. So like when I was in my late 20s and exploring queer relationships and stuff, I was so stoked. I met someone and we were like both polyamorous and both pansexual. And there was another one that we're like, oh my God, this is great. And then once we started this like getting to know each other and relating, like those meant different things to us. And we actually weren't compatible as a like partnership. We're still really good friends today, so that's wonderful, and intimate friends, but it just wasn't a relationship romantically, sexually. So even when we have these labels that we can like maybe find our people or, you know, talk about what we're going to do an open marriage or something, like we actually need to talk about what that means to like the culture. And like what it, like, let's do some research on what these labels mean, but then also like, what does it mean to us?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, and you know, monogamy is the social expectation. So we think of it as a relationship structure that everyone agrees to what it is and what that means and how they understand it and so on. But that's not the case, right? Like
No,
a lot of the time we get in trouble in monogamy because someone thinks flirting is cheating, or someone thinks masturbating is cheating, or looking at porn, or whatever it is. Like there are all these ways in which, like, what do you mean by that? Like, what exactly are the boundaries here, right? And before we had all these labels and these words like polyamory, people had a lot of different relationship structures that, you know, like swinging, we think of swinging as this very set, like, I mean, that's still a thing, but it's, you know, in the 70s, like that's how all the parents like got their rocks off or whatever.
Exactly.
Without it having to be any sort of big social issue, you know. So, you know, these kinds of relationship structure things have been around for an extremely long time. Like this isn't news. What's news is that, you know, people are, you know, thinking about it mindfully and exploring it from that perspective too, of like, what does this mean to my identity and my sexuality? You know, and I think for me, you know, like I said, I think I have a relationship to this idea of monogamy as I don't want it to be an expectation. I don't want it to be assumed because it has this patriarchal like weight to it and history to it and so on. So it's kind of important to me that it at the very least be a conversation, that it's at the very least something that we're talking about, something that we're aware of, you know, even if we're not doing anything about it. Like I feel like there needs to be kind of an understanding
And I think like a lot of people that I've worked with over the years, like I don't have a morality around what relationship anyone chooses for themselves. Like I don't think there's like, I'm not connected to like what is good or what is better. I don't prescribe to that because everyone is so different and what their needs and wants are. But I do think that like the people that have asked the question, you know, am I monogamous or am I just doing this because I've been told that's what we do, right, or the straight or whatever identity, you know, that is the normative or pervasive identities. It's just like, even if I love when people like ask those questions and are still monogamous. I'm like, fuck yeah. Like, you know, like right. It's a great, like if you know about yourself that structure like makes you feel more lush, then like, great, I want that for you. And then another thing too is like, there's a lot to be learned from polyamorous relationships that you can apply skills to monogamy.
Sure,
so one thing about that is like, you have to like always be checking in with yourself. What do you want? What are your needs? How are things going? And like really do a lot of work, especially if you have multiple partners and like things going on in your life. Like you have to be in tune, like with your self-consent. Who am I? What do I want? How do I communicate that? So there's like a breadth of intense amount of personal skills that you get from versing into like multiple relationships, right? And, you know, whether people stay in polyamory or not, and they go back to monogamy, there's like tons of skills that you can bring to it. And so even as a coach, when I'm working with straight hetero monogamous folks, it's like, oh, have you done monthly relationship check-ins? You know, and they're like, what are those? I'm like, well, let me show you. And then they bring that to their monogamous relationship, and that it's not stagnant or like assumed what it is for years and years and years. And then that's when monogamy starts to break down at times, is because there's not like a clear evolving way to have those check-ins, to have those intimate, like, where are we? What are our goals in our relationship? Who are we individually? What do we want to do together? You know, it's just like assumed. And then sometimes chaos happens because there hasn't been that like intentional check-in once in a while. And I think, yeah, like there's so many things that polyamory can offer all types of relationship structures, because like at the end of the day, you have to face yourself. I mean, you don't have to. You'll be more messy if you don't and hurt multiple people. But like it is an ask to like be honest with yourself, ask for your things that you need and want, see where people can meet you and where you can't, and get your needs met through yourself or other people, right? So yeah, that's one thing I want to say. And I think Lindy is like in the very early stages of figuring out all of those things about herself and her growth and all of these things around like non-monogamy and what could be good for her or not.
Absolutely. So, one other question that I wanted to ask you that I've been sitting with is the way that when they initially have this conversation, the way Aham speaks about his polyamory is similar to how someone might speak about their sexuality. You know, in this way of like, this is who I am, I can't change it, you know, it's how it goes and so on. And in the podcast that I referenced, they were also talking about like, if you are non-monogamous or polyamorous and you want to explore things that way, don't try to do it with someone monogamous because it's just not going to work, right? And so I'm curious about this, the relative stability of that as an identity. Like, is it something, is it a choice, like a lifestyle, or is it like a sexuality where it's just who you are, or is it some mix of both? Do you have an answer to that? I don't know if there's an answer to that.
Yeah, there's not, I'm not going to be a definitive answer on anything over people. But what I can say to it is that I've met many people in my life and clients that resonate with both. Right? So that they've chosen a lifestyle that works better for them, or their web of connections, or people that are like, this is who I am and I can't change that about myself because it's just the way that I love. Right? But I think at the end of the day, like, I don't think I've been like the choice, like I don't have a choice to be polyamorous. It's just like I I don't have a choice on the way that I connect and love
Right.
many people. And we get to like explore and figure out what that relationship is to us, right? So I more identify with the whole, like, it is who I am, and I've just always had abundance of people and love around me and community and friendships, right? But I think there are a lot of people that are like, oh, I really see that this lifestyle piece is amazing for me. You know, and shout out to like, you know, the disability justice people in the world that are like, wow, like I need a web of people and we're all contributing in different ways and I need a community. And sometimes that is multiple relationships in polyamory to have a web that is more secure. Right.
And I'm curious, those of you listening too, if you want to add comments or thoughts about that. I'm curious, you know, because the sense I'm getting, I guess, is sexuality is on a spectrum. Maybe this is too, right?
Totally.
And I think, like, of course there are going to be choices, right? I mean, you know, in this case, and again, I don't know these people, like Lindy's more on the monogamous spectrum. And she's exploring whether or not she has that room to stretch or she wants to, and so on. And so much of what I kept thinking as reading the book was like, it is okay to be monogamous, Lindy. Like, you don't have to do this, you know?
100%.
Like you're not a bad person. Like, you're not unevolved. Like, you are allowed to just want that. Like, that is okay, you know? And it's also okay for a hum to want polyamory. Like, I think that's
100%.
also, you know, we should be able to choose these things. And then the negotiation with the partner is where the sticky stuff starts to come in, right? It's like, okay, well, so what could this look like? Where could we move with this? And I guess the sense I got, which again, I don't have a Hum's perspective and it's not for me to judge, but is the sense that like he could have made some different choices right around this. And I mean, Lindy could have as well, of course, you know, and a lot of it was like a communication breakdown kind of thing. But it feels like there could have been a lot more ethical ways to explore the polyamory than what happened, I guess.
Well, and like, what is like, okay, say it's not like, if you're saying that I have to be polyamorous and you also decide to like marry a more monogamish person, like I would be having years of conversations before getting married to that person.
Yeah, right,
like
right.
years if to make
Right.
sure like we actually align in enough ways. We have enough overlap to make that
Right.
work. There are relationships
work,
that are, to make it work. There are relationships that are good and functional, that one person's monogamous and one person's polyamorous. Like that is a structure that can be okay. But I think both of them, again, based on the little knowledge I have from a book and a couple interviews, is that they didn't do that pre-work to see what do they have in overlap, what is going to be okay. And like, you know, I think there's a lot of folks that try polyamory and be like, ooh, that's too much on my nervous system. I can't do that. And I'm like, great, don't do it. Right? And I think too, it's like really hard to introduce polyamory when a relationship's also not doing good. Right? That's
Right.
just like you're setting yourself up for more intensity.
Don't have a baby or open the relationship to save it. Don't do those things. You're adding a lot more stress.
Don't do it. You're just going to be through more chaos. So that's
Start
one
with a
thing I would do.
conversation.
Yeah, talk about it for
Yeah.
years, right? Like there was a couple I worked with for many years and, you know, they finally decided to open up their relationship because of certain stuff, but it was like from a place of like they were both feeling curious and abundant and like they had talked for years about what that would be like for both of them. And, you know, and you can only go so far from reading all the books, talking about it at length for years, and then the practice of it, right? Like that becomes something else. But yeah, if you're finding like it's too much for your nervous system or you don't want to put in that actual amount of labor, you don't have to.
You're not a bad person.
But there's also this thing that I think is built in too, is that like we also have to figure out, depending on our like trauma past and all of these things, like what is like a hard relationship and what is a relationship that's hard at times. Right? And so like you get to decide, do you want like what percentage, and I sometimes get really nerdy about this with my clients that are in high conflict relationships, like do an Excel document, literally write down 4 months, if it was a good day, a bad day, or an ugly day, a hard day, whatever it is, and compile the data. And if you're like in a relationship that is really hard and always processing and really triggering, more than whatever percentage, like, is that the way you want to choose? And again, I think like since the 70s and 80s, women specifically have more choice to end and change those relationships. Right? We have more power to change those relationships and get out of unhealthy or abusive scenarios more than we ever have, right? But it's still like we're still building that behavior. It's like maybe we know we can, but like how to actually change it, it takes lifetimes, I think, on growth and trying and all these things. But like, again, that's what I'm curious about, their real dynamic that we don't actually know, is like, how much is it the big scared feelings or the hard times or the fuck ups or the mistakes, the behavior issues, and like, how much is it lovely and nourishing and supportive? We don't know that. We don't have those percentages with these people.
Yeah, and one of the things that I think really weighs heavy on Lindy in the book is having to be perfect in the public eye. And she talks about that a lot from a body positivity perspective, that like, there's this interesting moment where she's talking about how she's found this nutritionist who's kind of like a therapist for her disordered eating. And she has this realization like, oh, I don't feel like it's okay for me to heal because I'm going to be letting down. If I lose weight, I'll be letting down the people that have come to look to me. Which you're like, wow, if it's fat liberation, like you got to be free to be in the body that's right for you, like whatever that happens to be, right? So I think from the relationship perspective as well, like, there's got to be a lot of pressure, having been so much in the public eye, like as much as she has been, but specifically so often, criticized for whatever it is, her body and so many other things. Yeah, like that would give you kind of most of us have this option to kind of like talk to the friends who we know are going to be supportive of the choices we're making, right? Or whatever it is. And we only get that positive feedback. But, we're not constantly being trolled. Like it's happened for me before. And it's like, it can be hard, right, to sit with. But it's not happening to me constantly the way that it is for her, right? So I feel like that's a piece that we also don't know in terms of like how much has that impacted her, how traumatic has that been, how much space does her nervous system get from that. We learn a lot about that inner narrative that she has, that self-hatred and that disgust. I mean, we do pick up like the way people talk to us, right? We can pick that up. It can become an inner narrative. And so, that's part of it as well.
Yeah. And I just want to say, it's just like, that I have such deep compassion for, because like if you are more in the public sphere, like you don't have just your own life, right? Like to make these like mistakes or beautiful things happen, like it's a lot more complicated when it comes to that and the pressures of being known.
And so much of what she's done too, it's like, she talked about her abortion publicly. She talked about her fatness publicly. Like, she's talking about her polyamorous throuple publicly. And it's this thing where she's trying so hard to just like be good and be a good person and like, offer up these good things. And a lot of the time, the way that she tells that story is like, she didn't necessarily mean to become a celebrity about her abortion. She was just like, I had an abortion and that was a great experience for me. And like, a lot of people were like, thank you for saying that. But then she's also getting this huge, pushback of people who were upset about that on all of these different levels. And, she's not making the kind of money that our Hollywood celebrities are making from the movies that they get accolades for. They might also be trolled, but at least they get these benefits, right? And she's she's getting the pennies from book writing, which isn't that much really.
It's not a lot. No.
But, another piece that I wanted to talk about is how I came across this whole story was that I read a piece on Substack. I'm pretty sure the first one I read was called I Escaped from Bluebeard's Castle, Lindy West Did Not. And I was like, ooh, like, say more. Because I do a lot of, like, mythology, folklore, narrative. Narrative is a big piece that comes up for me in therapy, like the stories we tell about ourselves, the stories that resonate about us. Even stories like I'm not enough or I'm ugly or whatever, like those are stories that can be really powerful in our heads, right? Hi everybody, it's me, Julie. I am interrupting because Tanille and I had so much to discuss with this book and with the discussion surrounding it that we talked for a really, really long time, and I've separated this particular episode into 2 parts. So you've just heard part 1, and part 2 is ready for you to listen to whenever you have a chance. We're going to be getting a little bit deeper into codependency and what that means, the potential abuse dynamics or dynamics within the relationship that could be at play here, some folklore. If you haven't heard Bluebeard's Castle, you're going to get a little bit more of that in part 2. So please do tune in to the next part when you get a chance, and don't forget to leave your comments and your thoughts, and don't forget to like and subscribe and share this podcast with someone who you think would find this conversation interesting. So thank you as always so much for listening, and tune in for part 2 right away. Thanks everybody.